My name is Andrea DeHann. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, the Alumni Lunch Series has gone online, and while we're sad that we can't offer you some pizza, we hope that you have grabbed a snack and are ready to listen today. We're very excited about the guest alumni we have joining us today, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guest, and then I'm going to start by asking her our first question. So let me briefly tell you a bit about Paige Frame. Paige Frame graduated from Utah State University's Professional and Technical Writing program in 2007 with a BS in English. Soon after, she landed a job at McKinnon-Mulherin. I practiced beforehand and I'm still tripping over it at McKinnon-Mulherin as an entry-level proofreader and technical writer. I apologize, Paige. I promise by the end of this presentation that'll just be rolling off the tongue. Working with a small to large company in a variety of industries, she grew in her role and served as a writer, editor, and project manager on training, documentation, and marketing projects, and eventually became director of operations. She went back to school in 2015 to earn her MBA from Westminster College and was appointed president of McKinnon-Mulherin in 2017, just shy of her 9-year work anniversary. Paige is a Utah native and can often be spotted in the Sugar House neighborhood, possibly chasing after her 2 rambunctious kids. And Paige, if you would start by just telling us a little bit about that history and how you came to be in the position that you're in today. And in order to facilitate that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn things over to you so that you can show us a few slides and take us on your journey of sort of how you got to be the president of that company that gave me so much of a tongue twister.
Sure, absolutely. Let me pull up my screen here. A little spoiler alert there. So a lot of this is going to be a bit of a recap of your great introduction, Andrea, but so thanks for doing that, and I'll give a little more notes as we're going along. But my the pieces that led me on the path to my current career really did start at USU. So I started school in 2004, graduating in 2007, and I did an event at USU kind of recently, and I think I told this story, so I'm sorry if people are hearing it again, but my joke is that I started at USU not really sure what my major was going to be, what I wanted to do. I had a roommate who was an English major, and at the time, I'm not sure if you still do it this way, but you take an entry-level English course that talks about the different emphases that you could possibly do. And my roommate said, "Man, this one sounds so terrible. This professional and technical writing, all you do is just fix typos and write user manuals." And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. That is what I want to do. So that's how I found that major and switched right away and loved it, and it was what I wanted to do. So I went through that program, was really pleased with everything I learned from there, and was lucky enough to get a job really soon after graduating. I had another kind of quickie job at a software company as their tech writer, writing their user manuals for their software. And then soon after got hired just as entry level tech writer at McKinnon-Mulherin. So just good luck there, and found that job through a mutual friend who knew the owners of the company. So I stayed there throughout kind of the last recession was about 2008, and stayed on and became the manager of custom projects in 2010, which for us was basically project manager of all projects coming in our door. So we, as a company, kind of shrunk down because of the recession. There was a time where there was only 4 or so of us on the team, but then we started to grow much bigger, and so even though I was manager of all the projects when we were small, we started to grow, and suddenly I was managing a lot more. And right about at this time, I believe it was right at 2010 is when our company went completely virtual. So we had an office space in downtown Salt Lake, and we always offered telecommuting, and there was a moment where there was two of us in the office. And we said, this is kind of ridiculous that we are paying for this whole office. No one's here. And so we went to be a completely virtual company, which today might not sound quite as bizarre, but at the time was kind of a big jump. So we all worked from home offices at that time and started managing teams in that way. And then 4 years later, as we were growing, and as I was growing in my career, I was promoted to Director of Operations, which was similar to my role before, but getting more involved in the business side of the company and how we manage the other managers with on the team as our company started to grow. And because my career was kind of going in that direction of managing more of the business and operations, less down in the noise, working on projects and writing, I thought it might be a good idea to learn more about how to manage a business. And I went back to school and got my MBA at Westminster. And the cool thing about that, the program I did through Westminster, is that it's a project-based program. So I was able to keep working while going to school. A lot of my projects I was able to do for the company. So as I was earning that degree, I was also writing marketing plans for McKinnon-Mulherin and figuring out how we can best reach out to our clients and improve our business plan. So that was a good jump there. And then in 2017, as Andrea mentioned, the founders of our company, who had been co-presidents for 20 years, decided to semi-retire and move away from the direct operations of our day-to-day, and I was appointed president at McKinnon-Mulherin. So they're still on our board and still help us with strategic decisions as we're moving along, but the day-to-day has kind of moved on to this new generation, which is a fun thing to be doing right now. So I have been at McKinnon-Mulherin for 12 years now, and even though my career path has been on this same with the same company on this kind of trajectory, it has been really interesting for me because we work with so many different companies doing a lot of different things. So that kind of brings to what I love about my job. The first thing is that it's interesting. So we work with small, big, all sorts of different companies, different industries. We are always working on something different. We do writing and editing, but also instructional design. So we'll do some training projects as well. And so you never know if you're going to be writing a proposal for a lean manufacturing company or writing a facilitator guide for a fast food restaurant. And so you're always learning about different stuff, working on new projects, working with different looking projects, just different design and brand elements. It's just always something new, which is why I'm not sick of it after 12 years. It's always something different that we're working on. With that said, that's exactly what makes it challenging, is that we are always having to stay on top of several different industries and learning about new, sometimes very technical content very quickly, and getting up to speed in that way. So it can be hard, and always working with new clients means that you in some ways have a different boss every week. So getting to figure out what those different personalities are like, how to manage them, how to best meet their expectations, it can be a hard task. But just like a lot of challenging things, when you're able to do that, it's very rewarding. And so a lot of times it feels like we're coming in and saving the day and making those impossible things happen, which is always a good feeling. And then finally, I love how flexible our company is, and that has a lot to do with what we're talking about today with working from home. We invest a lot into work-life balance, making sure that people are set up to succeed, but are also able to balance that with their everything else going on in their life, and making sure that it's a supportive environment for them. And I just think it's very cool that as a small company, our owners set it up this way, and I like to continue the tradition of it is that because we're small, we can be flexible with each employee and set it up for whatever works for them. So making sure that not everyone has the same hours that they like to work or the same projects they like to work. Some people need flexibility in different ways. So it's really nice to be able to work with our team and find solutions that work for them. So that's my quick introduction. I will stop sharing my screen and toss it back.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you, Paige. And yeah, one of the big focus of this, the topic today, working remotely and everything, because a lot of people, a lot of our students, as well as a lot of our alumni, have all of a sudden been thrown into sort of working remotely, right? And so it's a really big, important topic right now. So with that first question, what would you say is probably one of the biggest advantages that you've seen being able to work remotely, and also what's one of the challenges?
Yeah. So I think that ironically, a lot of times the biggest advantage is also the biggest challenge. So I think that both distractions and a sense of connection can be both the advantage and disadvantage in working from home. So we don't always think about it because so many people are used to working in an office setting, but there are a lot of distractions when you're in an office setting. And so a big advantage of working from home is that you can shut off those areas where you're not, hearing people chat at the break room, or people aren't just walking into your office and asking you questions when you're in the middle of something. And so for a company that focuses a lot on writing and where you need to sit down and focus, it can be a big advantage to be able to work from home and have that focus. You can set your instant message to do not disturb, and really people can't disturb you. You're in your area. So that's really important. But on the flip side of it, you have the distractions of home. And so it's a whole different set of distractions, but it's distractions nonetheless. So just making sure that you have a dedicated space, that wherever you're living, the people that you live with understand when you're working that you're working, and that you can't be uh, interrupted or can't go do other things. I think that can be a big disadvantage, especially if it's harder for you to get that under control. And I'd say the same thing about connection. It's hard. It can be a disadvantage that you're not seeing people day to day, that you have to make a bigger effort to make a connection with your coworkers. And I mean, we've joked that sometimes you forget that you like people if you've just been emailing them with them for a while, and you have to see them again and say, oh yes, I like you. We're not just email people anymore. But on the flip side of it, it also can be an advantage because you do have to make that extra effort. And so it's not just a walk by your office and hello in the morning, but we're really making big effort to chat with each other, interact, get to know each other. And so sometimes that connection is a little more deliberate and ends up being a stronger connection in the end. So as long as you're managing it and being intentional about it, it can be a good thing.
Thank you, Paige. Our next question is to sort of expand on what you just talked about, but to take it to your role specifically. What is it like to lead a team remotely? And more specifically, can you walk us through the stages of forming a team, dealing with conflict, performing effectively, and wrapping up a project?
For sure. Yep. And I made some notes so that I could hit on each of those things. But uh, I do think that there are some extra challenges, just like we talked about. But a lot of times, managing a team remotely is not totally different from managing a team in person. That you need to, just like in person, you need to set expectations, and you need to follow through with making it easy to communicate that we are meeting those expectations, following through with them. So in terms of putting the team together first, we just need to make sure that we're talking to each other, matching the right skills to what we need on the team, and then again, just emphasizing what our expectations are of each person. And so being very clear about that, on who's expected to do what, by when, how they're going to do it, how we're going to communicate and interact throughout the project is just really important to have that good setup from the beginning so that it's not misunderstandings piling on top of misunderstandings as we're going through. And then as we're going through and making sure that we're performing effectively, we just want to make sure that we keep having regular check-ins. So it can be really easy to be in your home office and head down just doing, moving along. And so having a regular check-in, not to micromanage and virtually look over someone's shoulder, but just to make sure that we're all on the right track to keep going towards what our end goal is. So a big thing we do is quality checks, and we make sure that the emphasis is not on, again, not looking over your shoulder, fixing what you're doing, but really to be supportive and a backup, so that that's a big difference between our company and maybe freelance writers. So freelance writers, good on them, but they're one man show or one dog show. They have to make sure that what they're delivering is the best. They have no one to help them out. And so a big advantage we have is that we're a team, and doing those quality checks kind of helps save people, gives them a first line before it goes to the client, before someone else sees it. So it's not so much a nitpicky, we're going to fix what you're doing, but this is your support, this is your backup, for us to come in and make sure that you're on track and we're all on the same page. So we do those quality checks, and we also do check-ins, whatever way makes the most sense for that team. So it might be setting up a team on our instant messaging board, and that's where we're going to put all our questions. It might be a daily or a weekly video call so that we can touch base that way. We don't have a standard as long as it's working for whatever that team or project is, making sure that they're keeping in touch, headed in the right direction, checking up on those expectations. With that said, just like in-person projects, sometimes there's conflict. Sometimes things are not going as planned and you have to course correct and figure out what went wrong. And so almost always, I would say that those types of conversations need to be as in person as possible. So if we can do a video call, even if we can just do a phone call versus an email, can be really important. So we are guilty of having that email chain that just gets longer and longer, and more miscommunications are entering as we're going along. And especially as writers, we often have more introverted people on our team, and so the natural inclination might not be to pick up the phone and talk something through. So what a big thing we try to do is realize when that email chain's getting too long or miscommunications are getting out of hand and we need to just pause, everyone regroup on the phone, on a video call, and work it out just like you would in person. So taking responsibility for what you might have done, having other people take responsibility, figuring out the best way forward is super helpful. And then in terms of wrapping up a project, we just want to make sure that, especially in a virtual world, it can kind of feel like projects just kind of fizzle and fade away. And so you want to make sure that you really do tie them up at the end with a client, make sure that they know, hey, we are considering this done. Does it seem done for your perspective? Is there anything else we can do for you? And then on our internal side, we always make sure we do a lessons learned meeting at the end, where we talk about what went well, what we can do better, how the client felt about it, what they think we could do better or not, and really have that time to regroup, mark it all down so that we can learn from it. And just like I was saying with working with different clients all the time, then we, of course, have repeat clients. And so when we can make notes about this client, this went really well, or maybe not so much, that can help us next time with that same client. So that's a good piece as well to help us for future projects as we're going along.
Nice, thanks. So another thing about like working remotely, I know like when you mentioned a little bit about how important connections are, And of course, in a standard office, you have a lot of things like potlucks or different office retreats, et cetera, in order to help develop that team culture and team unity there. So what are some effective ways that you've noticed to be able to do this with a remote team?
Yeah, so one piece of it is that we are, as we keep talking about, we're kind of in this weird world space right now. So we've been a virtual company for 10 years, and just recently have we not had any option to get together in person. And so in a normal setting, we would do all those things. We'd have times where our virtual team would get together and have a potluck and do parties and get-togethers, and we have a book club. So we do a lot of those things. We have a space downtown where we like to get together. And even when we are locally getting together, we have our out-of-state people call in and join us as kind of a mix of in-person and virtual. But we also understand that now we can't, and also we're not doing that, daily, even when we could. So some of the things we like to do are we have a more official newsletter that we send out monthly to make sure that everyone is just kind of aware of what's going on with the company. You kind of forget that you're having these side meetings with people, and if people aren't in those meetings, it's not like they're just, again, walking by the office and overhearing it. And so it's good to have a moment where we say, just so everyone's aware, we're working on these projects, and sending that out. So we do a newsletter that way. And then we've got our, we use Teams, so any instant messaging system that you might use. And then we have specific channels about different stuff. So it might be industry knowledge, or for us, editing questions. But then we also have a kudos channel and a water cooler channel. And the water cooler channel, especially lately, has just been really helpful for our team. That a lot of times it's goofy, funny stuff, and just like, funny meme I found. But other times, especially with a lot of stresses going on, it's a good place to say, man, today was rough. Like, my kids did XYZ, and it's a time for other people to pipe in and say, yeah, me too. I can't believe that, especially when we were having earthquakes and kids suddenly at home, and our water cooler was blowing up. Everyone was like, I don't know how to handle this. And it's just a really good way to connect with your coworkers in that way. And then we do have that kudos channel that is just so helpful for everyone. And we use it to share any positive feedback we get from clients, but our team will also just share positive feedback about each other too, of, Sally really stepped up for me. I can't believe how much she helped me on this. And it's just a really good way for us to remember that we're all working on stuff and doing a good job, because that's the other thing that can happen when you're virtual, is that you might be working so hard you forget how hard everyone else is working too. And so you want to be sure that we're reminding people of that, and recognizing that we're all doing the best we can, but also all the good things that we're doing, and really making it happen. So those have been good things for us.
Before I ask the next question, Paige, I just want to remind participants, I see that some folks are starting to populate our Q&A section. But again, as we're talking to our guest Paige today, if any of you have questions for her, please feel free to add those to the Q&A chat area, and we will get to them at the end of our questions. So Paige, you talked about sort of the positive ways that you form bonds with your employees, even if you are working remotely. One challenge we hear about working remotely is that your personal and professional life start to blend. And that's, I think, something that a lot of us who are just doing this for the first time are still struggling with as this goes on and on. So what effective suggestions do you have for developing a good work-life balance?
Yeah, for sure. There's a cartoon from a while ago, and it said, I can't remember if I work from home or if I live at work. And it does. It feels like that sometimes, that, you're just like, I'm always in the same space, especially lately when you can't go out to even go to dinner, or whatever you might normally do. So the biggest, most important piece of advice I can give you is to have a dedicated space. So just because you're working from home, you should have a workspace that this is where I do my work. I'm not saying that you can never pick up your laptop and go somewhere else. But if you are consistent, if you don't have that dedicated space and you're consistently working from just wherever you feel like it that day, it's very hard to get into that mindset of I'm at work now. So that's my biggest piece of advice. And I know that not everyone can have a dedicated office in their home, but even if you just have a desk and this desk space, this is my work, that alone can be really helpful to get you into that mindset that this is work, this is home. And then also having a pretty consistent schedule, whatever that means for you, to stay in that same mindset of, even though you're not getting into a car and driving to work, you're still having that same, I start work at 8 or I start work at 9. And for some people who work from home, we have a very flexible setup, and we let people kind of decide what their schedule is. Sometimes you don't. You have your employer saying, no, for sure, you're starting at 8. That's when you clock in. But even if you don't, it's really important to set those timetables for you and also for your colleagues. It's really important for them to be able to trust that, I know that Karen is going to be on at 8. So I'm not going to bug her right now at 7:30 because I know she's coming on. I can wait until then. And so being consistent in that way is going to help your colleagues and hopefully even your clients to know when you're on as well, and try not to bug you outside of those hours. I'd also say it's important to take breaks. You take breaks when you're working at an office. You should still take breaks when you're working from home. The cool thing about taking breaks working from home is that you can often do things that you wouldn't be able to do at work. So your break might be going for a run, or maybe it is changing the laundry out or something like that. It's okay to do that. It's just important to then come back to work and once again come back to your dedicated space and be back in the mindset of I'm working now. That's really important too. Also, I think a lot of people general advice right now is to make sure that you know when to turn off, and I fully support that. I do think that you need to know when your work day's over and then log off. With that said, I also think there's some flexibility there too. If you are working in an office and you get your email to your phone and you would normally answer it because it's a quick question, I think that's okay too. I think that sometimes we get so much in the mindset of like, no, I need to make sure it's a hard line that we're losing a little bit of that flexibility. So I think it's fine to be flexible with yourself and to do what works for you, as long as you're keeping those boundaries between life and work. And also, I think I said this, but making sure that whoever else is in your house, if it's your roommates, your spouse, your kids, your parents, whatever it might be, just making sure that they understand all these things too. What your dedicated space is, what your schedule is. That can really help set those expectations with the people that you're living with as well. So even right now with kids at home, I've got a 4 and 8-year-old at home, and we have a schedule of, this is when mom and dad are working, and of course they know they can come down and interrupt if they need to, but it's really helpful to just set that expectation of this is work time, this is play time, and knowing that playtime's coming so that they can let you work during work time is really good.
All right, and then my last question then is just, as far as like students or people who are looking to do this, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to develop, not just a job remotely, but actually an actual full career? What advice would you give them?
So I think a lot of the things that we've talked about are really important pieces. So I know for us, at least, it's really helpful when someone who's applying says, I already have a workspace set up and I already know when I work most efficiently at home, because then we know that they've thought through all these things that I've just mentioned to you about having a dedicated space and having a consistent schedule. It's really nice to know that they've already thought it through, already have a plan, rather than us trying to help them through that. But apart from those things, I really think that that the remote piece of your career can be quite secondary. I really do think that if you are good at whatever your skill or job is, being able to build that trust, whether it's, you're already working someone, you're building that trust to prove that you can switch to working remotely, or if you're even just building that trust in the interview to just show, I really know how to do my job, I know how to reach out if I need to. It is a big trust thing. And so I think it's not so much about what skill you're doing, but just making sure that your employer or your boss manager knows they can trust you at home doing what you need to do.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm London. I'm the events intern here for CHAS. And now I've got some more questions for you, Paige, if that's all right.
Sure.
The first one I'm going to ask you is, let's see. You've mentioned Microsoft Teams. What other tools do you use to make working from home more effective?
Yeah, great question. So, so we do use Microsoft Teams mostly for instant messaging. We've switched around with our different video call formats. So I know we're on WebEx right now. That's what we used to use. We switched a couple years ago to Zoom, and so Zoom is pretty much our go-to for any phone or video calls that we're having internally or externally. So we used to have some what do I want to say, the like internet-based phones, and decided that they just weren't useful for us anymore. So we have our cell phones for some client calls, but most meetings we set up through Zoom and use that platform. But I will say, so we've been bouncing around. I also use GoToMeeting and GoToTraining, and then Teams, of course, also has video chat. I know this is hard to say and get your mind around, but you have to be comfortable with a lot of different tools because you don't know what your employer might use, what end clients might use. And so today's a great example that we got on early and tested some things out, and that's really what you need to do. If you're unfamiliar with the platform that you're using, you just want to make sure you're comfortable with it before you really dive in with your client or your team. But in terms of other tools we also use SharePoint, which has been a good move for us. We used to have a co-located server, but being able to collaborate in real time on SharePoint and on our with our tools that way has been a big move for us. So those are the main tools that we use virtually.
Great. Okay, thank you for those. Another question for you. So you mentioned you work with many different clients. How do you manage working with so many different personalities, especially remotely?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing we do is those project histories. So if we have a history with a client, we do try to track that and share that with the team because people are different and they're different to work with. Sometimes people want a whole lot of interaction, constant status updates, maybe even want to collaborate with you. Other clients want to know just when it's done. So you really want to know which client switch because you could really disappoint or annoy your client if you're not right on there. So so we do have those client histories if it's an ongoing client. We also hope that our sales team would get some of that information up front and pass that on to the team before the project starts. But if we don't have either of those pieces, a big an important piece is our kickoff meeting. So we'll have a kickoff meeting with all the important stakeholders for that project. And we talk about a few of these things about, how often do you want status and what's the best way to communicate with you? Do you want us to pick up the phone and call? Do you want email communication? And sometimes those questions might feel a little awkward at first, but you get used to asking them. Just saying, what do you want? Tell us how to work with you. And so I think that's important. And then we always kind of go from a status of staying professional and getting more and more friendly. I think that that's a piece that's also hard to balance on how how casual a client wants to be with you. And so we always try to be at least one step more professional, start that from a more professional stance and kind of work backwards. But it's kind of a give and take, just like it is when you meet anyone, and figuring out what works for them and how you can best meet their needs.
Great. Okay, now for another question. You graduated at a time of economic uncertainty. So how did you stay resilient as a job seeker during like 2007 and 2008 when you first graduated?
Yeah, good question, especially right now while we're on the verge of we're not sure, right? So so for me, I think that I really did luck out, that a lot of people my same age, I know they sent out hundreds and hundreds of applications with very little callbacks on them. And so, I mean, it is hard. And so for me, I did have not 100 applications go out, fewer than that, and the biggest piece for me was hanging on. So, like I said, our company, we had probably about 30 employees and shrunk down to about 4 during the last recession. And so a big piece of that for me for hanging on was just always trying to change and improve my skill set. So when we do so many different things, I learned so much at USU about technical writing, professional writing, and then McKinnon-Mulherin also does instructional design, which I knew zilch about. But being able to say, nope, I think I can do that, and diving in, giving it a try. I wasn't really, geared towards managing things, but when I saw that, hey, we've got 4 people, someone here's got to manage it, I was like, okay, me too, I'll do it. And so I do think that during times of kind of uncertainty, being willing to just toss your name in the hat, say I'm willing to give it a try, giving it your best shot. I think all those things go a long way to help secure your own future. And for me, it worked out because I love this job and I stayed with them through it. But I also think that, I don't think anyone should stick with a job that really rips them apart and they hate it. But it's also worth, giving it your best shot and really trying to stick with things when there might be uncertainty out there.
Great, thank you for that. And then my last question for you is, I know you've already shared a bunch of them, do you have any more tips on how to build relationships and create that connectivity while working at home?
I do think that I think video calls are really important, and I was number one like anti-video calls. I hated them at first and was like, this is so ridiculous why we're doing this. But you can really see a lot on people's faces that you can't hear. And I think that really does build that connection and makes it more human. So even though sometimes we're kind of like embarrassed by what's going on in the background of our house, it can also, it makes you more of a real person. And it's okay if your dog or your kid walks in once in a while. We don't want it to totally interrupt your work all the time, but that's something that you don't get in an office. You don't get, so-and-so's 4-year-old walking up and you can see what they look like more than just a picture on their desk. Maybe even be able to say hi to them. So I think that while making a big deal about separating home and work, I also think lean in on those things and, pause your meeting for 2 minutes to say hi to kid that just walked in and recognize that it happened. We had one meeting where we all brought our dogs to the meeting, and that was kind of a fun moment. Like maybe not the most efficient meeting, but now we all know everyone's dog. It's a fun way to kind of get to know each other. So I think that instead of trying to pretend like we're not all working from home, to recognize it and lean in on that so that you can get to know people a little better.
And Paige, I'm going to cut in here with one more question that came to me on the chat. I think it may have come to me only as the host, so I'm not sure London was able to see it. We have one listener who asked, and this will be our final question, how did you happen to choose to get an MBA rather than a master's in tech writing? How have you used the business concepts you learned? And do you recommend that combination, specifically some sort of business degree and a humanities degree?
Yeah, I love this question because it lets me highlight my mentor's advice to me that I that was exactly the track that I was planning was I thought, well, I think I'd like to go back to school. I'll get my master's in technical communication. That was just made perfect sense to me. And I do think that's a great idea if that is your path. For me specifically, my mentor came to me and said, I think you know all that. And that, I'd been working in my current role for probably about 8 years at that time and doing this day in, day out. And I really understood the writing piece of my job. And so while I'm sure I would have learned some things there, I don't think it would have been useless. It also might have been more of a check the box rather than really improving on skills that I didn't already have. And so that's the reason I went towards the more business side of it, especially as I was going into being director of operations and then kind of with my eye on managing the whole firm at some point. The MBA just made a lot more sense for me and helped me figure out some of those things where I might be a little weaker. So, now in my current role, I have a lot of, I'm working with numbers a lot more than I certainly was with my undergraduate in English and also working on much more strategic decisions. And so that was really important to me. But I love the second part of that question because even if it's not your plan to, become president of a small business, I think that mix of technical communication and business administration is a great mix because a lot of the documents we're writing for companies are strategic business communication. And so if you have a better idea of the struggles that those businesses are going through or the pain points that they're trying to work through and use this communication to solve, you can be a lot more consultative in your writing and be very not only come to that kickoff meeting and really understand what they're saying when they're explaining what their concern is or what they're trying to make sure this meets, but really join that conversation and say, yes, you're absolutely right. You should be doing X, Y, Z. I think this piece of communication can help in this way. So I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I do encourage that that mix of the technical communication and business administration. It kind of gives you a bigger picture of not just how businesses work, but how you can use communication to really help solve some of those problems.
Well, thank you so much, Paige, for all of your great input there. Especially, a lot of even some of our audience members were saying how great this advice was, so much on remote work, scheduling, the dedicated space, all that, the topics that you went over. Wonderful. Thank you so much for everything here and for coming here and or being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And Paige, I'm just going to take a moment to share our next event, which will feature your coworker. So on May 28th at 11 a.m., for those of you listening, we will be featuring Ted Twinting. He's also an alumni of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and he's the Director of Sales and Marketing for McKinnon-Mulherin. And he specifically is going to be talking about LinkedIn strategies and how you as a job seeker can work on your profile and have a better understanding of what employers see when they're looking at your LinkedIn page. So we hope that people will come back and join us on May 28th. And as Joseph said, Paige, we just want to thank you. We want to thank all of our listeners who were here today and participated in this conversation. I think Paige gave some wonderful advice that is so timely and so useful because we all find ourselves in this situation in one aspect or another. And obviously, if anyone has questions about the series or about, how to start your own career search, please reach out to Joseph Banks, reach out to myself. And we just thank everyone for coming and being part of this conversation today. And again, Paige, we so appreciate you giving us an hour out of your workday to do this with us.
Yeah, thank you again. It was great.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, London. And yeah, I'm going to stop the recording and wish everyone a wonderful day.